Hi, my name is Pat Snyder. I'm a dementia caregiver educator. And today I want to talk to you about something called freezing. We often think of freezing as just being a Parkinson's movement issue. Um, I'm going to talk about that some today because many dementia patients do develop freezing issues in terms of movement. But I want to expand the topic today to include a lot of cognitive issues that you might not have thought about before. Some research is being done on this, and we're finding out that there's a lot more involved in freezing in terms of uh, the cognitive process seeming to just stop or get halted or encumbered in some way when you are dealing with dementia patients. So, freezing doesn't just happen when you're walking. It can occur with speech. It can occur with visual issues, spatial visual issues, such as placement, depth perception, those types of things, where there can be an inability, an apparent inability to be able to speak when you want to, or see things as they are in reality, because somehow they think, some scientists think there may be a kind of bottleneck that's happening in the processing of whatever the person is trying to do in that moment. And it makes them appear to somehow freeze in that process or not be able to complete what they initially had set out to do. Whether it has to do with speech, whether it has to do with visual issues, whether it has to do with some sort of movement or walking. And so let's talk about that. It can even cause what you may have experienced as a caregiver with your loved one if you are trying to move them. Let's say they're at a place in their journey where you're trying to help them, say, get up out of a chair, or you're trying to help them move off the bed or off the toilet or something like that. And you are asking them to maybe perhaps give you their hand, their arm, and you say, now move forward, come with me, and you'll find them moving in the opposite direction. You can easily interpret that as them being resistant, especially when they get a look on their face that is negative. That negativity that you may be seeing in their face and their body language response could actually be a fear, a confusion, a feeling frustrated because they were thinking of doing exactly what you asked them to do, but their body and their brain, they're not cooperating. And so this is a form of freezing. I know this happened with my husband quite a number of times, quite often, where he would just appear to pull exactly in the opposite direction that I was asking him to. And then he'd squeeze my hand a lot harder, and he'd look really upset. And it's very, very easy to assume the worst in that scenario versus understanding, oh, this is one of those freezing moments. So what can I do to help with that? One of the things that's quite simple, not necessarily always easy to do, but if you can get into this habit of giving yourself a 5 to 10 second pause. And that instead of insisting, no, I told you to come, no, stop pulling the wrong way. Make yourself stop as a caregiver, which helps them to stop. Pause. Give about 5 to 10 seconds for there to be a reset, a time in which the cognitive process has an opportunity to flow the way it might have flowed normally in very, very split-second fashion. It's somehow possibly getting jammed at that point so that the caregiver cannot get the response from the person who has the disease that they want to get, because that person is not able to give it to them. They may think they're doing it, And that's part of the the confusion that's going on in that freezing process. So give that pause, 5 to 10 seconds. Use very few words at that point, giving them only one task at a time. Like, take my hand. I'm putting my elbow here. Lean toward me. Stand up. Where you're slowing everything down, giving time for it to process. And you might say it even slower than I just said it, so that there is a 5 to 10 second pause in each of those steps. There's one step given at a time, because multitasking is something that is very difficult for someone whose brain processing is impaired to do. It's very, very difficult. Think about what it feels like when you've had a really bad night's sleep and you're talking to someone on the telephone and they're speaking fast, or it sounds fast to you, and they're telling you several things at a time. Think of that level of frustration that most of us have felt in those moments. Okay, think about that going on almost all the time within that person. What is it we need that person on the other end of the phone to do in that moment? We need them to pause. We need them to slow down. We need them to say one thing at a time, not 2 or 3 things at a time rapidly. So try to extend that courtesy to your loved one that you're taking care of, and see if that will help, because the research is beginning to show that there is a kind of a logjam that's happening. It's like a tunneling effect when too many things are being said at once, and the processing is getting bottlenecked in, and something jams up, something freezes. And if that is in fact what is they think they can see physically going on when they're doing their research, then slowing down, using a few words, only giving one task at a time might really help with that process, so that you may not eliminate this completely from your lives, but you may minimize and reduce the amount of time that you're having to deal with these very frustrating situations. Frustrating for you, frustrating for the person who's sick. Another thing that can interrupt the cognitive process and cause freezing or a fail, so to speak, is sequencing. So putting a series of things in order. They normally happen. Let's take going to the bathroom, going to the toilet. So let's say the typical procedure, the typical sequence that your loved one is used to is walking to the toilet, lifting the lid, pulling down the pants, sitting, and then going to the bathroom, then flushing the toilet. So this is an example. So if any of those steps are out of sequence, it can cause failure to process or a sort of freezing event. You're not getting the processing you normally get. For example, if the toilet lid is up and it's not item number 2, they didn't walk to the toilet, they didn't lift the lid, it's already up, then all of a sudden they could go straight to peeing in their pants without pulling them down. They could, that messed up the process. It's because that routine is established. Remember how important routine is to a dementia patient. What to expect, because there's muscle memory involved along with the cognitive memory that's going on. So something that's messing up the sequencing can cause these things to happen. It can give you an understanding of, oh, that's why that happened. So that maybe next time you can always set up the bathroom area so that the lid is where it normally is. And so you may avoid having that happen next time. Little things like that can make a big difference. Um, Now let's move into the walking and the movement part of freezing that most people are most familiar with. And here are a few tips that I picked up. I went online. You can do the same thing. Go to YouTube, and I think I put in Parkinson's freezing tips. Found some fantastic videos where you can see what some of the things that I'm about to tell you. You can see them actually demonstrated, which I think is a lot easier to actually see that. And they're being demonstrated by people who are physical therapists and really know what they're doing in this field. Um, so let's um, let's look at what that freezing while walking looks like. It causes issues such as walking as if they are stepping over something that's not there when there's a pattern in the rug. I know my husband did this. We went to the dentist office one time and he was walking from the lobby back to the treatment room, and they had tiles on the floor where there was some dark tiles, and I could tell he was likely seeing those dark tiles as holes in the floor because he came up to them and he just stopped and he tried to step over them. And so what I did in that case was I said, John, your eyes are playing tricks on you right now. Look up at the wall. Look up at the wall and just let's keep your eyes on the wall. Do not look down. Trust me, that floor is flat. And he was able to do that. And I kept cueing him to look at the wall, look at the wall, look up as you walk. And he was able to make the rest of the trip without feeling like he was going to step in a hole at any step along the way where there was a black tile. So things like that where you're cueing them, you're helping them, recognizing, oh, this is what is going on, not having those kinds of things in your house. Another things, though, that some people do, I know in nursing homes, they will sometimes put a black rug like in front of the elevator because the dementia patients view that depending on how far along in their journey, because a lot of dementia patients eventually get these kinds of issues. They would see that as a hole, and they wouldn't stand in front of the elevator because they were afraid they were going to fall in the hole. So you can use that sometimes to your advantage as well as avoiding certain things. But here are some examples of cueing that help when you are dealing with an inability to move properly. Freezing is when the feet tend to be feel like they're glued to the floor and they cannot make the next step. And so what was recommended was some sort of rhythmic thing where you could, as caregiver, just go 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And that does something that seems to kind of unlock the pattern. Rocking side to side, helping them rock side to side if they can't do it themselves. Rocking side to side is a rhythmic thing that could help. Using music of some sort that provides some sort of rhythm like that, where that seems to be a key that sort of unlocks that for some people. So I thought that was very interesting. Also marching, where you're lifting the foot and the knee very high. When the person who is freezing at that point, think about marching. Take a marching step and stepping very high. That will sometimes break that freezing pattern. Also, pretending that you are stepping over something. A caregiver might put their foot right in front of the foot of the other person and say, okay, step over my foot. Or even safer, having a little laser dot stick in your pocket and just say, oh, see the laser, see the dot, step on the dot. Step on that dot and put it a little bit ahead where they will have a target to go toward. One caregiver said he put a tissue, and always had tissues in his pocket, and he would drop a tissue on the floor and say, step on the tissue. So giving them something to focus on where their brain could very much focus on a target. There is a very expensive walker that provides a laser line, but The laser dot is a lot less expensive, and the tissue certainly is. So these are things that you can use to give them a step over or a goal to step on something that can break it. Also, when there is a freezing in the ability to pivot, to turn, where you're going in one direction, then you need to turn and go in another. If that pivot makes the person freeze, suggest and help them walk in a small circle where they go around, and they end up going to the same place. They just do it in a different way. Another physical therapist that I saw in the YouTube videos suggested the 5 S's. Using mindfulness or very much focusing on the task at hand. It's when you become frozen. Stop trying. The tendency to keep trying to walk when you're frozen doesn't work. It just makes the person get more stressed, and so it tends not to help. So first is stop, then stand tall, straighten the shoulders, shake it off. Do something to shake that out of your body. Shift your weight, like back and forth, or like we were talking about, side to side. And then take an exaggerated step. Or if the person is frozen while they're seated, going through those same processes of stop, getting tall in the chair, shaking it off, shifting the weight in the chair, and then exaggerated standing up, or if you're standing, exaggerated stepping, like we talked about earlier, the marching. Those are things you can do to break the freezing in the movement issue. But I hope that you got a new way of thinking about this, that if this is not just a Parkinsonian thing, this is also a cognitive thing, this freezing process. And remember, simplify, simplify, slow things down, pause, give the person time to reset, to reprocess, and stay very positive yourself as much as you can that you are going to help them get through this. This isn't like you're, frustrating me. This is, let me help you through this moment. Let's get through this together. That can make a huge difference in the outcome for both you and the person who is suffering with dementia. Once again, thank you for what you do. It's hero's work. Have a good day.